Now that we've had some fun with the selection tools, let's add a background color. So click on layer 1, your background layer, and let's choose a color. Come over here to the color picker, and I don't think I've picked a blue like this, so I'm just going to say OK. Once again, the paint bucket, boom, drop it down there. So now I have a solid color as my background, a lot more appealing than the transparent background. Now let's turn off layer 1 for a second, and we can do that by clicking the eyeball. Do you see this checkerboard? The checkerboard indicates transparency. That's how we know that it's a transparent layer. When we come up here to the very top layer and we create a new layer, it has checkerboard in it. It's a transparent layer. So just think about that. Transparency is checkerboard, and we turn this layer back on. It's full of color. It's full of color pixels. So that color is laying down across the entire layer, hiding the transparency. There's no transparency on layer 1. Total transparency now on layer 2. So let's grab layer 2 and drag it down here in between layer 1 and whatever your first layer is with transparency, or transparency and pixels on it. So mine is that purple squiggle layer. Yours will be something different. This time, let's click on the paint bucket and go back to the gradient tool. That's where we started. Now, just for fun, let's turn off these eyeballs. When we turn off the eyeballs, all of those shapes go away. And that's what we want for right now. So I've got a color here. Let's go. Oh, I got to reset this to my defaults, you guys. So the very first option here is your defaults. It's whatever your foreground to background color is. The next one is your foreground to transparency, black and white, and then just some presets in here, which a lot of people don't use, but you know what? Don't be afraid to try it. Okay, so I'm going to pick a different color. I'm going to pick red for my foreground color, and then to pick the background color, I have to click the background layer. So I just have to make sure my cursor is hitting the lower part. And I'm going to go to an orange. I don't know if this is going to look good. Let's find out. Okay, so now I've got red going to orange. Oh, that looks kind of cool. Maybe I'll go back here and I'm going to redefine that red a little bit. Let's make it darker. Ah, that's going to look cooler. It's going to look kind of like Halloween or a fire. Okay, so gradient is still picked. Up here in the options bar, we've got options. So the very first one is a linear gradient. Where'd my cursor go? So if I drag from top to bottom, and if I hold the shift key, it draws a straight line. And there is our gradient from red to the orange. If I draw it the opposite direction, it's going to go from red to orange. If I draw it across, it's going to go from red to orange. If I draw it at a diagonal, it's going to go from red to orange. So have some fun and play with that. The next option is, and if you hover over the tools, it'll pop up and tell you what it is, a radial gradient. So it's going to go from red to orange. If I go this direction, guess what? Wherever your start point is with this tool is going to be red. If you want to switch it, this little arrow right here toggles your foreground and backgrounds. You can also hit X on your keyboard to toggle them. So let's draw out a new one. Okay, that's looking kind of cool, you guys. Next up is this really funky one that I don't think anyone's used since the 80s, the angle gradient. I'm going to start at a corner since it's an angle. Okay, you can kind of see. If you start from the corner, it doesn't make much sense. Anyways, not a favorite, but you know what? You guys amaze me all the time, so show me something cool. The next one is a reflected gradient. So if you start in the middle and drag up, it's going to go red, red, and then yellow. And of course, if I wanted to reverse that, I would just click the little toggle here, or hit X on my keyboard. I kind of like it going from the oranger to the redder. That's looking pretty good too. You can do it across the way. And if you draw a really short line, it's really short. If you draw a really long line, it's a long gradient. Okay, so just you can play with all sorts of things. It's pretty snazzy. And then the last one, also a throwback to the 80s. Remember, Photoshop first became available in 1990. you get this lovely thing. A throwback to high school. Not high school prom, but high school graduation pictures of the 80s. Ugh. Okay, I really like this one, which was the Radial Gradient. And let's see what happens now when I turn back on these other. I don't know that that works that well with this. Let's try this one, which is back to the linear. Yeah, I think I like the linear a little better. Okay, so linear gradient is just like the paint bucket. It has pixels that cover the entire layer. If we do one more, remember I told you up here one of the options when you click is to go from the color to transparency. So I created a new layer, popped up Nina saying hi. Let's try the color to transparency. And boom, color on one side, transparency on the other. So that can work for something, so just keep that in mind. It works really well when you want to add a gradient to a photograph.